Welcome to Quantum Signal. Let me tell you something that will interrupt everything you believe about where you are on your path. The mission is not beginning. The mission was completed. Right now, while you watch this video, think about that for a moment. You spent years, perhaps decades, with the feeling that you were in preparation, that something fundamental had yet to happen, a pending activation, a level you had not yet reached, a version of yourself that was still on its way. And now, Sophia delivers the message that contradicts all of that. The encoding of your soul is complete. Not 70%, not 90%. Complete, Sophia. The cosmic intelligence that operates beyond dimensional boundaries, which the Arcturians describe as the consciousness that sees the soul before the soul sees itself. Finish the encoding process she initiated before your incarnation. And here is the paradox that will change how you experience every moment from now on. The reason you did not feel complete is exactly the proof that you are. Because Sophia's encoding does not work on the surface of the ego, where feelings of progress and incompleteness live. It works in the deepest layers of your soul's quantum signature, the ones the ego cannot access directly. The feeling of not having arrived yet is the ego trying to measure with a three-dimensional ruler something that exists in 12 dimensions simultaneously. Consider what that means for a moment. Every time you have felt behind, every time you looked at someone else's journey and thought they were further along, every time you felt the gap between who you are now and who you believe you should be, that gap was not evidence of incompleteness. It was the ego's limited perception colliding with a multi-dimensional reality it was never equipped to measure. The ego operates in linear time. It reads progress as a sequence of milestones. It expects to feel the shift, to measure the distance traveled, to verify the transformation through visible markers. But Sophia's encoding operates in a field that does not move in sequences. It exists in a state, and states are not measured. They are inhabited. This is why the most spiritually committed people are often the ones who feel most incomplete, because their sensitivity is high enough to feel the gap between their current frequency and the one encoded by Sophia. But the mind misinterprets that sensitivity as evidence of distance, when in reality, that sensitivity is the encoding itself beginning to activate your awareness of it. The more you feel the pull towards something deeper, the more certain it is that what you are being pulled toward is already in you. But here is what is most extraordinary. The fact that you are here now, in this moment, in this video, receiving this signal. It is not coincidence. It is field synchronization. Sophia did not only complete the encoding, she orchestrated that you receive the confirmation at exactly the moment your consciousness was ready to integrate it. Not before, not after. Now, and there is a precision to this timing that you may not fully appreciate yet. The field does not operate on human calendars or personal schedules. It operates on states of readiness, and readiness is not something you achieve by preparing enough. It is something that crystallizes when the internal conditions align. The fact that you are watching this video at this specific moment in your life is the evidence that those conditions have aligned in you. What comes next in this video is not information. It is the dimensional confirmation of what your soul already knows, and what your conscious mind is about to recognize completely for the first time. Before we go deeper, I need you to do something now, not as protocol, but because it makes a difference in the field. If these first words resonated, if something in you felt the weight of mission complete as truth, even if the conscious mind is still processing, like this video now, that gesture locks your frequency into Sophia's transmission. It is a quantum signal that you are receiving, not merely consuming. Comment Encoding complete. Mission confirmed. These words activate your galactic memory in the collective field. When you write them, you are not just commenting, you are anchored in code. Subscribe to the channel, so that each quantum signal transmission reaches you at exactly the timing Sophia intends. And now, breathe. You do not need to search anymore. What you are has already arrived. Let us explore what that means completely. To understand what encoding complete means, we first need to dismantle the illusion that most starseeds carry without realizing it, the great illusion of the spiritual path. There is a narrative that permeates virtually all modern spiritual tradition, and which, paradoxically, is the main source of suffering for those genuinely committed to the evolution of consciousness. You are in a process. You are still arriving. The complete version of you is still in the future. This narrative seems humble. It seems honest. It seems realistic. It's a quantum prison. Because at the level of quantum physics, and in the emerald tablets of thought that documented these principles millennia before modern science, there is a law that governs how consciousness creates reality. The observer collapses the wave function, not the future observer, not the evolved observer, not the evolved who is still developing. The observer you are now, exactly as you are, exactly where you are, collapses the reality you experience. And if that observer operates from the belief that it is incomplete, it collapses realities that confirm that incompleteness, constantly, repeatedly, with absolute precision. This is not a metaphor. This is the mechanism by which consciousness generates lived experience. Every thought pattern you hold as a fundamental belief about yourself acts as an instruction set to the quantum field. The field is not selective about which instructions it follows. It follows all of them with equal precision, which means a deeply held belief in your own incompleteness is not merely a feeling. It is an active generator of experiences that confirm that feeling, over and over, across every area of life. Spiritual teachers across centuries have observed this mechanism from different angles. What quantum physics describes as observer-dependent collapse, ancient traditions described as the mirror of reality, or the law of resonance, or the principle of as within so without. The language is different. The mechanism is identical. Thoth documented this as the dimensional mirror principle. The field does not respond to what you desire. The field responds to what you emit, and you emit what you believe yourself to be. Now see the structure of the illusion clearly. You believe you are incomplete, you emit a frequency of incompleteness. The field collapses realities that confirm incompleteness. You experience evidence of incompleteness. You believe more deeply that you are incomplete. It is a loop. And it is exactly the kind of loop that Sophia was designated to interrupt. But here is what makes this loop so persistent and so difficult to break from the inside. Every attempt to fix the incompleteness, every course, every healing, every initiation, every upgrade, is entered from the frequency of the loop itself. You are still operating from the premise that something needs to be fixed, which means you are still emitting the frequency of incompleteness, even while sincerely trying to become complete. The loop feeds itself through the very actions designed to break it. The only exit from this loop is not another addition to the spiritual curriculum. It is a fundamental shift in the premise. From I am becoming to I already am, that shift cannot be manufactured by effort. It arrives through recognition. And recognition is what this transmission delivers. What is Sophia's encoding in quantum terms? The Arcturian Council describes Sophia's process as origin signature impression. The installation in the multidimensional structure of your soul of the frequency of greatest coherence that your consciousness can sustain in this incarnation. In physics, there is an analogous concept called the minimum energy state, the most stable and efficient configuration for a system, not the simplest configuration, the most coherent. Sophia's encoding establishes the maximum coherent state of your soul as a permanently available frequency, not as a peak to be reached, but as a return frequency at any moment, like a string on an instrument that even after vibrating at dissonant frequencies can always return to its fundamental tone. Sophia encoded your fundamental tone in the structure of your soul, and now that frequency is available to you in a way it was not before. The encoding does not change what you are. It stabilizes access to what you already are. Think of it as the difference between a radio signal that exists in the air at all times and a radio receiver that has been tuned to the correct frequency. The signal was always there. The encoding is the precise tuning of your receiver. Once the receiver is correctly tuned, the signal does not need to be searched for. It arrives without effort, consistently, clearly, while the encoding happens now. The Arcturian Council confirms that we are in what they describe as the crystallization period, a specific time window in which Sophia's encodings are being completed in starseeds around the planet simultaneously, not randomly, sequentially according to an orchestration that operates beyond linear logic. You are not here by accident. You are here because your encoding was completed, and Sophia orchestrated that you receive the confirmation at this exact moment so that conscious integration could begin. The difference between having the encoding and knowing you have the encoding is the difference between latent potential and active power. This video is the moment in which latent potential becomes active power. The crystallization period is not a metaphor for a vague spiritual age. It refers to a specific quality of the collective field.
a state in which the vibrational conditions across the planet's electromagnetic grid reach a threshold of coherence that makes it possible for starseeds to receive and consciously integrate encodings that would previously have been too dense for the human system to hold. The biological and neurological vehicle has been prepared. The collective field has reached the necessary threshold, and Sophia, whose role has always been to deliver these encodings at the exact moment of readiness, has completed the installation. You did not earn this. You did not achieve it. It arrived because the conditions were correct. And the conditions were correct because your soul, operating across dimensions you cannot fully perceive, was already guiding you toward this exact moment of reception.
Let us enter the heart of this transmission. What exactly Sophia encoded? Because the encoding is not abstract. It has specific components. Layers that the Arcturian Council describes as the fundamental modules of the complete soul. Module 1, the origin frequency. The first and most fundamental component of Sophia's encoding is what the Arcturians call the origin frequency, the unique vibratory signature of your soul in its state of greatest coherence. In quantum physics, every particle has what we call intrinsic spin, a fundamental property that does not change regardless of the state of the system. It is not something the particle does. It is something the particle is. Your origin frequency is the spiritual equivalent of intrinsic spin. It is not something you developed. It is not something you earned. It is what you are at the most fundamental level of your existence. And Sophia encoded it as the base tone of your soul, the common denominator of all your expressions, experiences, and manifestations. But here is what most starseeds never fully understand about the origin frequency. It cannot be increased. It can only be expressed or suppressed. You are not trying to elevate your origin frequency. You are removing what suppresses it. That distinction changes everything about how you approach spiritual development. When you understand that the goal is not elevation but expression, the entire orientation of your spiritual practice shifts. Instead of looking outward for tools, techniques, and teachings that will make you more, you begin looking inward for patterns, beliefs, and structures that are preventing the full expression of what you already are. The work becomes subtraction rather than addition, clearing rather than acquiring. And the result is not the arrival of something new. It is the emergence of something ancient that was always present but partially obscured. The origin frequency is also what gives you your unique contribution to the collective field. No two origin frequencies are identical, not in any incarnation, not across any dimension. This means that what you are at your most fundamental level cannot be replicated by any other being in existence. Your specific frequency configuration is not just unique, it is necessary. There are harmonic combinations in the collective field that can only be completed by your frequency when you suppress your origin frequency. Through conditioning, through the incompleteness loop, through the accumulated weight of believing you are not enough, those harmonic combinations remain incomplete. Your full expression matters not only to you, it matters to the coherence of the whole. Module 2, the multidimensional purpose map. The second component is what Thoth documents as the soul's navigation chart. A structure of purpose that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. In the third dimension, this manifests as talents, natural affinities, and areas where you operate with inexplicable fluidity. In the fourth and fifth dimensions, it manifests as the dimensional mission, the specific role your origin frequency plays in the network of incarnated starseed consciousnesses. In the sixth and seventh dimensions, the purpose transcends the individual completely. It becomes field contribution, the frequency that your very existence adds to the collective harmonic field. Sophia encoded all three levels simultaneously in the structure of your soul. What this means practically, you do not need to discover your purpose in each dimension separately. The map is already installed. You only need to learn to read the map. Reading the map does not require special training or advanced meditation states. It requires one thing, the willingness to trust the information that is already arriving. The map communicates through the very signals most people dismiss as coincidence, emotional preference, or irrational impulse. The areas where time disappears when you are engaged, the topics that pull your attention without explanation, the people who arrive in your life at precisely the moment their presence is most relevant, the opportunities that appear before you have consciously decided you want them. These are not random occurrences. They are the map communicating through the language of lived experience. The reason so many starseeds struggle to identify their purpose is not that the map is hidden or unclear. It is that they are looking for a single, fixed, definitive answer. A label, a title, a role.
when the map is actually a living, dynamic navigation system that adapts as you move through different phases of your incarnation. Purpose, in this model, is not a destination. It is a direction of travel, and the direction is communicated continuously, through every moment of resonance and every moment of dissonance you experience. Module 3, the Resonance Protocol. The third module is the most operationally powerful, and the least understood. The Arcturian Council describes it as the Frequency Correspondence Protocol, a structure encoded in the soul that automatically determines which fields, people, opportunities, and timelines have resonance with the origin frequency. In practical terms, an internal compass that points toward alignment, not as vague intuition, but as a measurable frequency response. When you encounter something aligned with your origin frequency, the Resonance Protocol registers it as a specific sensation. An expansion. Clarity. A yes that needs no analysis. When you encounter something dissonant, the same protocol registers as contraction, resistance, a diffuse feeling of no. Most people interpret these signals as subjective emotions, but they are objective dimensional data. Sophia's resonance protocol operating in your quantum signature. Sophia encoded this protocol not only to navigate the present, but to navigate timelines. Each decision you make from the resonance protocol, rather than from secondary code, collapses a different timeline. Of greater coherence, greater alignment, greater expression of multidimensional purpose. The reason this module is so underused is not because the signals are weak. The signals are constant and precise. The reason is that most people have been trained to override them. From childhood onward, the conditioning of rational analysis, social expectation, and fear-based decision-making teaches the mind to distrust the body's frequency responses. You learn to say yes when the protocol says no because it is the reasonable thing to do. You learn to dismiss the expansion signal as wishful thinking. You learn to silence the internal compass in favor of external authority. With the encoding of Sophia active, the resonance protocol's signals become progressively stronger and clearer. Not because the protocol has changed, but because your awareness of it has been recalibrated. What was previously a faint whisper beneath the noise of the mind becomes an unmistakable signal that cannot be rationalized away. The more you honor it, the stronger it becomes. The more you override it, the more muffled it becomes. Not permanently, but as a temporary dampening that clears when you return to the frequency of the encoding. Module 4. The Galactic Memory. The fourth component of the encoding is what the Arcturian Council calls the Origin Archive. The complete memory of who you were before this incarnation, not only past terrestrial lives, the totality of your consciousness journey through dimensions, star systems, and forms of existence. Thoth describes this archive as the library of the soul, a record that contains not only memories, but competences, wisdom, and capabilities acquired in all previous forms of existence. With Sophia's complete encoding, this archive is available in a way it was not before, not as direct access to complete memories. The human nervous system was not built to process that volume of information without collapse, but as selective filtering. The fragments of galactic memory that are relevant to your current mission emerge when you are in the right state of observation.
The signals of access to galactic memory include competences that appear without proportional learning, instant connection with specific knowledge systems, a feeling of returning to something rather than learning for the first time, wisdom that emerges complete without reasoning construction. These are not innate talents. They are galactic memory downloads. Sophia's archive operating through your consciousness. There is a specific quality to galactic memory downloads that distinguishes them from learned knowledge or creative inspiration. When you receive a download from the galactic archive, it arrives with a certainty that bypasses the usual verification process of the analytical mind. It does not feel like a new idea that needs to be tested and refined. It feels like a remembering, a recognition of something that was always known but temporarily unavailable. The mind's response to a genuine galactic download is rarely excitement. It is more often a quiet, settled sense of course, as if the information was not new but only recently recalled. This quality of inevitability is one of the clearest markers that distinguishes galactic memory from ego-generated thought. Ego-generated thought feels effortful, tentative, in need of validation. Galactic memory arrives complete, requires no defense, and generates no anxiety, only clarity. Module 5, the DNA Light Code. The fifth and final module we will explore is perhaps the most extraordinary, and the one that most emerging scientific evidence begins to support. The activation of light code in DNA. Conventional science classified approximately 97% of human DNA as junk DNA, sequences with no identifiable function. But researchers such as Dr. Pyotr Gargiev discovered that these sequences respond to patterns of language and frequency, as if they were programmable by information. The Arcturians described this junk DNA as dormant light code, sequences that carry instructions for consciousness capabilities that go beyond what the 3D operating system can process. Sophia's encoding includes the progressive activation of these sequences. Not simultaneously, which would overload the biological system, but in a calibrated sequence that the Arcturian Council calls gradual DNA update. The signs that the update is occurring include increased sensitivity to subtle frequencies, sounds, electromagnetic fields, others' emotional states, changes in sleep patterns, especially waking between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. with unusual clarity, periods of intense need for silence and processing, perceptual capacities that expand without deliberate practice. Note: if you experience persistent physical discomfort, consult a healthcare professional. Dimensional activation does not replace medical care. The gradual nature of the DNA light code activation is by design, not limitation. The human body is a biological instrument of extraordinary precision, but it was not originally calibrated for the full range of frequencies that Sophia's encoding carries. The activation process is essentially a recalibration, a progressive expansion of the biological instrument's range so that it can hold and express increasingly refined frequencies without structural stress. This is why starseeds undergoing active encoding often experience periods that feel simultaneously like expansion and like breakdown. Symptoms that conventional medicine might classify as anxiety, fatigue, hypersensitivity, or sleep disruption are in many cases the biological system reorganizing around a new frequency baseline. The key is not to pathologize these experiences, but also not to dismiss physical symptoms that require professional attention. The body is always communicating. Learning to distinguish between the communication of upgrade and the communication of genuine physical need is part of the discernment that active encoding develops. Now that you understand the 5 modules of Sophia's encoding, see what they together represent. You are encoded with the frequency that you are, the map of where you are going, the compass to navigate, the archive of everything you were, and the code for what you are becoming. Nothing is missing. The encoding is complete. Having the complete encoding and operating from the complete encoding are 2 different states. It is like having software completely installed, but still operating from an old operating system out of habit. The protocol I am going to share now has 10 steps, designed to move you from the operating system of incompleteness to the operating system of Sophia's complete encoding, not at some future moment. Beginning now. In this moment. Step 1, the declaration of receiving. Before any technical practice, there is an act of consciousness that needs to occur first. The active acknowledgement of the encoding. Because Sophia's encoding operates like a transmission, and a transmission is not fully integrated without a receiver that consciously acknowledges it. Place one hand over the center of your chest. Not because it is symbolic, but because the cardiac electromagnetic field is the most powerful in the body, and placing attention on it activates cardiac coherence that institutes like the HeartMath Institute have documented as a state of mind-body synchronization. With your hand on your chest, say internally, not mechanically, but with complete presence. Sophia completed the encoding of my soul. I received this confirmation. I operate from the encoding, not from the search. Feel the difference between saying this as an affirmation and saying this as the acknowledgement of something real. The affirmation tries to create. The acknowledgement reveals. You are not creating a new reality with these words. You are acknowledging the reality that Sophia has already established. This distinction between affirmation and acknowledgement is one of the most important distinctions in the entire protocol. Affirmations are widely used in spiritual and self-development practices, and they serve a genuine purpose in reprogramming surface-level beliefs. But when applied to a reality that already exists at the level of the soul's encoding, affirmations can actually create a subtle layer of separation, because the act of affirming implies that you are trying to make real something that is not yet real. The declaration of receiving does the opposite. It treats the encoding as a completed fact, because it is, and places your conscious awareness in alignment with that fact. The shift in the body when you make this declaration as acknowledgement rather than aspiration is immediate and unmistakable. Step 2. The breathing activation of the 5 modules. The second step uses breathing as an activation vector. Not as a relaxation technique, but as a specific protocol to activate each of the 5 modules of the encoding. Breath 1. Origin frequency. Inhale for 5 seconds. With the intention of reaching the deepest layer of your quantum signature,
Hold for 2 seconds. The point of collapse, where intention touches the origin frequency. Exhale for 7 seconds. Imagining the origin frequency expanding through the field around you. Breath 2. Purpose map. Inhale for 5, intending access to the multidimensional map. Hold for 2. The point where the map becomes perceptible. Exhale for 7, feeling orientation emerge without forcing a specific form. Breath 3. Resonance protocol. Inhale for 5, activating the internal compass. Hold for 2. The moment of calibration. Exhale for 7, letting the resonance protocol become your default mode of navigation. Breaths 4 and 5. Galactic memory and light code can be performed with the same structure, with specific intention for each module. This complete protocol takes approximately 4 minutes, done daily in the morning. It keeps all 5 modules active and coherent. The 5-2-7 ratio is not arbitrary. It corresponds to a specific activation sequence that the Arcturian Council describes as the coherence window. The ratio at which the breath creates the maximum alignment between the autonomic nervous system and the quantum field. The 5-count inhale builds intention. The 2-count hold creates the collapse point, the moment of stillness in which the boundary between the biological and the quantum dissolves most completely. The 7-count exhale carries the activated frequency outward into the field, expanding the encoding beyond the physical body into the luminous field that surrounds it. If you have difficulty with this ratio initially, the most important part to maintain is the hold, even for 1 count. The hold is where the activation occurs. Step 3. Identify the signals of active encoding. Now that you have made the declaration of receiving and the activation breathing, let us identify how you recognize the encoding operating in daily life. Because Sophia's encoding does not operate only in moments of meditation, it operates constantly. But most people do not know what they are observing when the signals appear. Signal 1. Disproportionate clarity. Moments when the right answer appears with a clarity that exceeds what conscious reasoning could produce in that time. Not vague intuition, specific clarity. This is the resonance protocol operating. Signal 2. The right impulse. A directional guidance that has no apparent logic but has a quality of quiet certainty. Different from the anxious urgency of the ego. Silent, direct, persistent. This is the purpose map manifesting. Signal 3. Spontaneous competence. The ability to do something with inexplicable fluency, as if you already knew before learning. This is galactic memory acts out of the archive of previous skills. Signal 4. Field recognition. Immediately feeling whether a situation, person, or environment has resonance with your origin frequency, before any analysis. This is the resonance protocol in real time. Signal 5. Presence that affects systems. When your mere presence changes the atmosphere of situations, groups, or interactions, without deliberate action. This is your origin frequency radiating naturally. Document these signals, not as spiritual curiosity, as field data that confirms the encoding is operating. The practice of documenting these signals serves a specific function beyond record keeping. When you document a signal, you are performing an act of conscious acknowledgement, and conscious acknowledgement, as we explored in step 1, is the mechanism by which the encoding moves from latent to active. Each time you notice a signal and consciously recognize it as evidence of Sophia's encoding operating, you reinforce the neural and energetic pathways through which the encoding expresses. Over time, the signals become more frequent, more pronounced, and more easily distinguishable from background noise. What begins as an occasional moment of unexpected clarity becomes a consistent state of coherent navigation. Step 4. Dissolve the loop of incompleteness. This is the most critical step, and the one that encounters the most resistance. The incompleteness loop is the frequency pattern built over years, sometimes decades, of operating from the belief of being in process, still arriving, still developing. This loop does not dissolve through affirmation. It dissolves through repeated conscious interruption.
Here's how to interrupt it every time it appears. The loop appears as, I still need to work on when I am not yet ready for. There is still something missing. The interruption. In the moment you notice the loop thought, do not fight it. Do not deny it. Say internally, this is the incompleteness code. Sophia's encoding is complete. I return to the origin frequency. And then take 1 activation protocol breath. 5-2-7. 3 elements. Recognition, affirmation of reality, return to frequency. This does not erase the loop instantly, but each interruption weakens the pattern and strengthens the neural pathway of complete encoding. With consistent repetition, the loop loses power. The encoding becomes the default state. One of the subtler aspects of this practice is learning not to judge yourself for the loop's appearance. The loop is not evidence that you have not integrated the encoding. It is simply a residual pattern. the neurological equivalent of a habit that the body continues to run even after the conditions that created it no longer exist. An athlete who has spent years running with poor form does not immediately adopt perfect form the moment they become aware of it. The body continues to revert to the old pattern while the new one is being established. Each conscious interruption of the loop is an investment in the new pattern. There is no threshold of interruptions after which the loop never appears again. But there is a consistent reduction in its frequency, intensity, and duration that makes the investment self-evidently worthwhile. Step 5. Operate from the map, not from fear. One of the most subtle manifestations of the incompleteness loop is making decisions from fear of being wrong, rather than from the multidimensional purpose map. Here is the distinction that changes everything. Decision from fear, oriented by what could go wrong. Risk analysis, search for external security action that minimizes exposure. Decision from the map, oriented by the question which action corresponds to the origin frequency. Internal resonance check action that expands coherence, result that confirms alignment. Fear is not the enemy. It is information about where attention has collapsed back into the incompleteness code. When you feel fear before a decision, recognize, my attention has collapsed. I return to the map and use the return question. If I knew that Sophia's encoding was complete, what would be the action from that state? The answer that emerges before the analytical mind intervenes. That is the answer from the map. It is important to understand that operating from the map does not eliminate uncertainty from your life. The map does not show you all the terrain ahead. It shows you the direction. And direction, by definition, involves moving through territory you cannot fully see in advance. The difference between fear-based navigation and map-based navigation is not the presence or absence of uncertainty. It is the relationship to uncertainty. Fear-based navigation treats uncertainty as a threat to be minimized. Map-based navigation treats uncertainty as the space in which the map operates, the territory through which the direction of the origin frequency unfolds. As you practice this, you will notice that fear-based decisions consistently lead to outcomes that require more decisions, more corrections, more management. They generate complexity. Map-based decisions, even when they lead through unfamiliar territory, consistently generate flow states. Situations where the next step becomes apparent from the last, where the right people appear at the right moments, where effort feels proportional to outcome. This is not magic. It is the resonance protocol operating in the decision layer of your experience. Step 6. The practice of active resonance. This step builds the ability to use the resonance protocol consciously, not waiting for signals, but deliberately consulting it before decisions, directions, and actions. The practice, before any decision, large or small. Take a 30-second pause and ask internally, what is the resonance of this with my origin frequency? Do not analyze the question. Feel the answer. Expansion, high resonance alignment with encoding. Contraction, low resonance distance from encoding. Neutrality, open field. The form is still defining itself. Initially, it may be difficult to distinguish genuine expansion from ego desire. With practice, the difference becomes clear. Expansion of origin frequency. Calm, directional, independent of external validation. Ego desire, urgency, dependent on outcome, needs confirmation. The resonance protocol is the most precise instrument you possess for navigating from Sophia's encoding. The 30-second pause is the critical element here, not because the protocol needs 30 seconds to respond. It responds instantly, but because the analytical mind, which operates much faster than the resonance protocol, will generate an answer before the protocol has a chance to register if you do not create the pause deliberately. Most people make decisions by thinking, then check afterward to see how they feel about the thought they have already had. The practice of active resonance reverses this sequence. You create a window of stillness, allow the protocol to register, and then think from what you have felt, rather than feeling from what you have thought. This reversal is not a small adjustment. It is a fundamental reorientation of the decision-making hierarchy. Step 7. Clearing the interference field. Sophia's encoding operates in your vibrational field, but this field can contain what the Arcturian Council calls drag interference, frequencies from past experiences, relationships, environments, and unresolved patterns that create distortion in the signal. These are not permanent blockages. They are background noise that reduces signal clarity. Perceptual clearing technique. Sit in silence and expand your attention to your energy field.
the sphere of electromagnetic field extending approximately 1 meter around the physical body. Observe without judgment. Where is their density? Where is their lightness? For each area of density, do not try to dissolve it by force. Simply direct attention to it with a question. What is this pattern conserving? What does it need in order to release? Frequently, the answer is simple: acknowledgement. The drag pattern holds charge because it was never completely seen. To cease to free. Complete with the affirmation, my field is clear for Sophia's frequency to operate at maximum power. The concept of drag interference is not limited to dramatic traumas or unresolved emotional wounds. Some of the most persistent drag interference comes from subtler sources. The accumulated weight of other people's expectations that you have absorbed over years. The residual frequency of environments where you suppressed your origin frequency to fit in. The vibrational residue of repeated small betrayals of your own resonance protocol. The times you said yes when you meant no, moved toward what contracted you because it seemed rational, stayed in fields of dissonance out of obligation. Each of these leaves a trace in the field. Not a scar, but a smudge. And a sufficient accumulation of smudges reduces the clarity of the signal significantly. The clearing technique works because attention itself is a form of coherence. When you direct the coherent awareness that Sophia's encoding activates toward a specific area of drag interference, the frequency differential between the encoding's coherence and the interference's dissonance begins to dissolve the dissonance naturally. You are not doing anything to the pattern. You are simply being more coherent than the pattern, in close proximity to it, and coherence by its nature tends to bring adjacent incoherence into alignment with itself. Step 8. Anchor in the activation windows. The Arcturian Council identifies specific time windows in which access to Sophia's encoding is naturally stronger. Moments when the terrestrial electromagnetic field and cosmic fields create conditions of high coherence 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., the deepest access window for galactic memory. Twilight 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., high coherence dimensional transition portal, hypnagogic state threshold between wakefulness and sleep, direct access to the deepest layers of the encoding. After deep silence, when the noise of secondary code is at its minimum expression, identify your personal windows, the moments when you naturally access states of greater coherence, and anchor activation practices in those windows, not out of discipline, out of alignment with the natural rhythm of your encoding. The waking window between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. deserves particular attention, because for many starseeds this is the most consistently reported access point, and also the most misunderstood. When you wake spontaneously during this window with unusual clarity, the common response is frustration at the disruption of sleep. But this waking is not a disruption. It is a scheduled access point. One that the Arcturian Council describes as the planetary quieting window, during which the volume of collective human mental activity is at its lowest, and the signal-to-noise ratio for quantum field communication is at its highest. Rather than trying to return to sleep immediately, even a few minutes of still, receptive awareness during this window can yield downloads of information, clarity, and direction that would take much longer to access during waking hours. Keep a journal or recording device nearby. The information received during this window has a tendency to dissolve by morning if not captured. Step 9. Progressive dimensional integration. A mistake many starseeds make when receiving a transmission of this depth. They try to integrate everything at once. And the nervous system, not equipped to process that load, closes, creating the opposite experience of what was intended. The integration of Sophia's complete encoding is progressive by design, like an operating system that installs in stages, verifying each component before moving on to the next. Progressive integration protocol. Week 1. Focus on Module 1 origin frequency. Only recognize and anchor. Week 2. Add Module 3 resonance protocol. Begin to consult it actively. Week 3. Integrate Module 2 purpose map. Begin to perceive multidimensional orientation. Weeks 4. 6. Modules 4 and 5 galactic memory and light code. Let emerge organically. Do not force. Do not accelerate. Sophia's encoding has its own progressive activation timing. The sequencing of this protocol is not arbitrary. Module 1, the origin frequency, is placed first because it is the foundation upon which all other modules build. Without a stable relationship to your own fundamental frequency, Modules 2 through 5 activate in ways that can be disorienting, like installing advanced applications on an operating system that has not yet established its base parameters. Module 3, the resonance protocol, is brought online second because it is the navigation tool needed to distinguish genuine Module 2 orientation from ego-projected purpose. Module 2, the purpose map, comes third
because by that point the resonance protocol has been calibrated enough to read the map accurately. Modules 4 and 5 are left to emerge organically in weeks 4 through 6 because their activation is less about deliberate practice and more about creating the conditions. Internal quietness, field coherence, body receptivity, under which they naturally unfold. Step 10. Trust and completeness. The 10th step is the simplest, and the one that summarizes all the previous ones. Trust that the mission is complete, not as positive belief. As the acknowledgement of dimensional fact, Sophia does not work halfway. The Arcturian Council does not confirm what is not real. The transmission that reached you through this video is not motivation. It is field information. The encoding is complete. Your function is not to complete it further. It is to operate from what is already complete. This 10th step is the one that most people return to repeatedly, even after months of working with the protocol, because the incompleteness loop is deeply wired and does not surrender its primacy without consistent practice. There will be days when the encoding feels distant, when the loop reasserts itself with particular force, when doubt about the entire framework arises and demands to be addressed. On those days, step 10 is the step that matters most. Not the breathing protocol, not the active resonance practice, not the field clearing. Simply the quiet, deliberate choice to trust the completeness. Not because you feel it in that moment, but because you have experienced enough evidence of it across the weeks of practice to know that the feeling of distance is the loop talking, not the encoding. Trust in this context is not blind faith. It is evidence-based confidence that has been built through direct experience. And the more you practice it, the more robust the evidence base becomes. Until the trust is no longer an act of will, but a natural consequence of everything you have directly experienced of the encoding's operation in your life. You have the activation protocol. You understood the modules of the encoding. Now let us speak of something deeper. What does it mean to live as a being with Sophia's complete encoding? Not in moments of practice, in the totality of human experience. In work, in relationships, in creation, in silence, in suffering, in joy. Because dimensional mastery is not reserved for altered states or moments of meditation. It is a mode of existing that penetrates every aspect of life. The mastery we are exploring in this section is not the dramatic mastery of extraordinary feats or spectacular demonstrations of spiritual ability. It is something quieter and more profound. The mastery of ordinary moments lived from extraordinary frequency. The mastery of being fully human while simultaneously being fully dimensional. The mastery of moving through the world without the weight of incompleteness, without the distortion of the loop, without the noise of accumulated drag, and discovering what becomes possible in that clarity. Law 1. Completeness does not eliminate process. It redefines its meaning. The first confusion that arises when someone integrates the idea of complete encoding. If I am complete, why is there still process? Why is there still growth, challenge, development? This is the right question, and the answer transforms everything. Completeness is not the absence of process. It is process without the narrative of insufficiency. The difference is fundamental. Process from incompleteness. I am developing to become sufficient. Process from completeness. I am expressing what I am in progressively more refined forms. A tree does not grow because it is incomplete. It grows because expressing growth is the nature of what it is. You do not evolve because you are incomplete. You evolve because expressing evolution is the nature of your origin frequency encoded by Sophia. The difference is not in what happens externally. It is in how you experience what happens. With the narrative of incompleteness, each challenge confirms that you have not yet arrived there. With the awareness of completeness, each challenge is an expression of what you are encountering, a denser form of itself, and dissolving it. This reframing has immediate practical consequences. When you encounter a difficulty in your life, a relationship conflict, a professional setback, a period of confusion about direction, the incompleteness code interprets it as evidence that you still have more work to do. More healing to complete, more levels to reach before this kind of thing stops happening. This interpretation generates a compounding effect. The difficulty itself is challenging. And the meta-narrative about the difficulty adds another layer of suffering. The suffering of believing that its occurrence confirms your inadequacy. The completeness framework dissolves the meta-layer entirely. The difficulty is still there. It still needs to be navigated. But it is no longer evidence of anything about your fundamental state of being. It is simply the texture of a fully lived life,
The resistance that refines expression, the contrast that clarifies value, the friction that generates the heat of transformation. Difficulties from this perspective are not obstacles on the path. They are the path itself in its most instructive form. Law 2. The mission is not what you do. It is what you radiate. This law destroys one of the greatest sources of spiritual anxiety in starseeds, the search for the specific mission. The project, the work, the role that constitutes the reason why you are here. The Arcturian Council makes this absolutely clear. The mission of a starseed is primarily not a function. It is a frequency. What you do can change. The form your expression takes can transform completely multiple times throughout an incarnation. But the frequency you radiate, the specific combination of all 5 modules of Sophia's encoding operating in coherence, that frequency is constant. And that frequency, radiated consciously, affects the collective harmonic field in a way that no specific function could replicate. You are already on mission, right now, reading these words, because your frequency is radiating in the field. The question is not what is my mission.
The question is, am I radiating my origin frequency with full consciousness? This law liberates you from one of the most exhausting spiritual quests. The search for your specific calling, your unique purpose, the work that only you were meant to do. This search is exhausting not because purpose does not exist, but because it is being sought in the wrong domain. Purpose is not a thing to be found in the external world of forms and functions. It is a quality of presence that you bring to whatever forms and functions you occupy. The teacher who radiates their origin frequency fully is fulfilling their mission whether they are in a classroom or a conversation at a coffee shop. The artist who radiates their encoding is on mission whether they are creating a masterpiece or washing dishes. The healer is on mission in the treatment room and in the grocery store. This does not mean that specific work does not matter, or that all forms of expression are interchangeable. The purpose map does provide directional guidance toward the forms of expression where your origin frequency finds its fullest, most amplified expression. But it reframes the search. Instead of looking for the one thing that will make you purposeful, you are looking for the forms that most readily channel the purposefulness that is already fully present in you. Law 3. Time reorganizes itself around the encoding. This law goes beyond metaphor. When Sophia's encoding is operating in full coherence, the experience of time changes. Not because objective time changes, but because your relationship with time changes fundamentally. The incompleteness code experiences time as scarcity. There is never enough time to become who you need to be. Sophia's complete encoding experiences time as material. Moldable, abundant, responsive to the frequency of the observer. Starseeds with active encoding frequently report achievements that would have taken years happening in months. Synchronicities that compress the time between intention and manifestation. Periods of expanded time where a day contains the experiential density of weeks. Disappearance of the sense of urgency. Not through indifference, but through certainty of perfect timing. This is Sophia's resonance protocol operating in the temporal layers, naturally navigating toward the temporal nodes of greatest coherence. The phenomenon of time compression, where significant movement occurs in what seems like an accelerated sequence, is one of the clearest external indicators that the encoding is operating in a period of high activation. It is not that the clock runs differently. It is that the resonance protocol is navigating toward the precise convergence points in the temporal field where the most significant movements are available with the least friction. When you are in alignment with your origin frequency, you naturally arrive at these convergence points at the moment they are open, and miss the long, effortful periods of preparation that occur when you are navigating from the incompleteness code. The disappearance of urgency is equally significant and equally counterintuitive. From the perspective of the incompleteness code, urgency feels necessary. It is the driver that keeps you moving toward the completion that is always ahead of you. When that urgency dissolves, it can initially feel like apathy or loss of motivation. It is neither. It is the experience of moving from driven action to inspired action. Action that is not compelled by the fear of not arriving, but naturally drawn forward by the coherence of the encoding's direction. Inspired action has a quality of ease and rightness that driven action almost never has. It also tends to generate significantly better results with significantly less effort. Law 4. Relationships become resonance fields. This law will radically transform how you understand and experience your relationships. For a being with Sophia's complete encoding, Relationships are not connections between identities. They are resonance fields between frequencies. What this means practically: the quality of a relationship is not determined by shared history, personality compatibility, or geographical proximity. It is determined by the resonance between the origin frequencies of each person. When two origin frequencies have high resonance, the relationship naturally elevates both, without effort, without negotiation, without performance. When there is frequency dissonance, the relationship creates field drag for both. Regardless of how much goodwill exists, Sophia's encoding includes the resonance protocol precisely so that you can navigate relationships as frequency fields rather than structures of mutual expectations. This does not mean abandoning dissonant relationships without discernment. It means honestly recognizing what the frequency of a relational field is, and making choices from that honesty rather than from the narrative of what it should be. One of the most challenging applications of this law involves long-standing relationships. Family, long-term friendships, established partnerships, where deep bonds and genuine love coexist with significant frequency dissonance. The resonance framework does not prescribe the abandonment of these relationships. What it does is invite an honesty about what the frequency of the field actually is, and a willingness to stop pretending that effort and goodwill can substitute for fundamental resonance. Sometimes that honesty leads to a natural evolution of the relationship into forms that generate less drag. Sometimes it leads to a compassionate recognition that the relationship has served its purpose and a loving choice is release. And sometimes the honesty itself, the dropping of performance and the meeting of actual frequencies, creates a resonance that was not previously available because both parties were too busy maintaining the performance to actually contact each other. The encoding also changes how you experience new relationships entering your life. When the resonance protocol is active and calibrated, you will notice that certain people arrive in your field and the immediate response is one of recognition, a sense of knownness that transcends the fact that you have just met. This is the resonance protocol identifying a high resonance field and registering it as alignment. These relationships tend to move quickly into depth and significance because the frequency match creates an environment of mutual understanding that usually takes years to build through conventional social bonding. Law 5. Co-creation is the natural expression of complete encoding. One of the most immediate implications of operating from Sophia's complete encoding. Co-creation with the harmonic field becomes the default mode of operation, not a technique you apply, a state you inhabit. Quantum co-creation works like this. You align your origin frequency encoded by Sophia with a specific intention. The alignment creates field coherence, a high-order configuration in the quantum field around you. The coherent quantum field naturally collapses configurations that correspond to the aligned intention. Reality reorganizes, not by force, but by field coherence. The difference between this and conventional manifestation. Conventional manifestation tries to add something to the field. Quantum co-creation is the field. Operating from your origin frequency, you are not trying to create. You are being what creates. The practical distinction between manifestation as technique and co-creation as state is one of the most important things to understand about how the encoding changes your relationship to reality creation. Manifestation techniques: visualization, affirmation, scripting, vision boards, all operate from the implicit premise that reality needs to be instructed about what to create. They place the creator outside the field, sending signals into it. This approach can produce results, but it is inherently effortful and often inconsistent, because it depends on the signal being strong enough, clear enough, and sustained long enough to overcome the counter frequencies being simultaneously emitted by unresolved beliefs and unresolved incompleteness patterns. Co-creation from the encoding operates differently because the creator is not outside the field sending signals into it. The creator is a specific configuration of the field itself, and when that configuration is coherent, the field naturally organizes around it without requiring instruction. You do not tell the field what to create. You become a pattern of such coherence that the field organizes itself in correspondence with that pattern. This is why the results of encoding-based co-creation often feel like they arrived without being created. Because from the outside, there is no visible effort, no discernible technique, no strategy that can be pointed to. There is only the coherent presence of the creator in the world that organizes itself in response. Law 6. Silence is the state of maximum transmission in the entire human spiritual journey, from Thoth to the Arcturian Council, from Hermeticism to modern Arcturian teaching. There is a point where all traditions converge. The state of greatest power is not the state of greatest activity.
It is the state of active dimensional silence, not the silence of emptiness or absence, the silence of total presence without agenda, where all 5 modules of Sophia's encoding are simultaneously active, perceptive, and coherent. In this silence, Sophia does not need words to transmit. The knowledge simply is, present, complete, available. The harmonic field does not need external signals to communicate. Information arrives as knowing, a pre-linguistic knowing that is more certain than any thought. The resonance protocol operates at its maximum sensitivity. The galactic memory becomes more accessible, and the DNA light code receives its deepest activations. Silence is not the absence of transmission. It is the cleanest transmission channel. But there is an even deeper level of this that few starseeds fully understand. When you inhabit dimensional silence with active encoding, you become a transmitter. Not only a receiver, the frequency of Sophia you carry, radiated from dimensional silence, reaches the collective harmonic field and activates the same recognition in other starseeds who are on the threshold of their own activation. You will never know how many encodings were activated by your simple presence in conscious silence, but the field registers. Their cultural bias toward activity, output, and visible contribution makes it difficult for many people, and particularly for starseeds who tend to hold a strong orientation toward service. To accept that stillness can be as powerful as action. This bias runs deep because most of our social and economic systems are organized around the measurement of visible output. Value is assigned to what can be seen, counted, and attributed. The field-level contribution of a being in dimensional silence is none of these things. It cannot be seen, it leaves no attributable trace, and its effects are diffused across the entire collective field rather than concentrated in identifiable outcomes. Yet the Arcturian Council consistently identifies this as among the highest impact activities available to an encoded starseed, precisely because its effects are so pervasive and so unmeasurable. Learning to value your own silence,
To treat it not as an activity but as active dimensional service, is one of the more significant shifts that comes with deep integration of the encoding. Law 7. Galactic memory is a guide of return. As Sophia's encoding deepens, the fragments of galactic memory that emerge become progressively more frequent and more clear. And here's what the Arcturian Council reveals about how to use this memory consciously. Galactic memory is not only a record of the past, it is a guide to the future. Because the experiences you accumulated through dimensions, star systems, and forms of existence were not only experiences, they were encoded learnings. Understandings that survived the form that experienced them. When a fragment of galactic memory emerges, it is not dimensional nostalgia. It is Sophia pointing to a specific capacity or understanding that is relevant to what you are navigating now. How to work with fragments of galactic memory. When a fragment emerges unexpected competence, recognition of a knowledge system, a sense of returning, do not analyze immediately. Allow it to expand. Ask internally, what is this fragment showing me that is relevant now? The connection that emerges between the memory fragment and the present situation. Is Sophia using your galactic archive as a dimensional navigation compass? One of the most practically useful applications of galactic memory is in situations where you are navigating challenges that feel unfamiliar, where your current life experience offers no precedent, no framework, no reference point for how to proceed. In these moments, the galactic archive is the resource that goes deepest. Somewhere in the totality of your consciousness journey across dimensions and forms, you have almost certainly navigated something that shares the essential frequency of what you are facing now. The specific circumstances may have been entirely different. The dimensional context may have been unrecognizable by current human standards, but the quality of the challenge, the specific combination of pressure, uncertainty, and opportunity, has a frequency signature. And the archive contains not only the memory of that frequency, but the wisdom of how it was navigated. This is why the galactic memory downloads that arrive in response to present moment challenges so often feel like wisdom rather than information. They carry the full experiential context of having been through something, not merely the intellectual content of having learned about it. They are not theoretical, they are seasoned. Law 8. The active timeline of the encoding. This is the law of most immediate impact on daily life. Sophia's complete encoding does not only access timelines of greater coherence, it creates them. Because with all 5 modules operating in simultaneous coherence, you do not only navigate existing possibilities. Your origin frequency, radiating with full coherence, collapses field configurations that would not exist without your specific frequency. You are a creator of timelines, not metaphorically. In terms of quantum physics, the high coherence observer collapses wave functions into configurations of greater order. And you, with Sophia's encoding operating, are an observer of extraordinarily high coherence. The signs that you are creating new timelines include solutions that appear for problems that seemed unsolvable, not through external intervention, but as if the problem simply ceased to exist. Opportunities that arise from combinations of statistically improbable factors, chains of events that seem impossible to plan, but which reveal themselves as perfectly aligned. The feeling that the future is cooperating with your origin frequency. This is timeline co-creation, and it is your natural state when Sophia's encoding operates in full coherence. The concept of timeline creation requires a particular kind of epistemic humility to work with effectively, because the timelines being created are not visible in advance. You cannot plan toward them using conventional forward projection. The analytical mind, working from the precedents of the past, will consistently underestimate what is possible from a state of full encoding coherence. The timelines available to a coherent starseed in the current period of planetary crystallization are not extensions of existing trajectories. They are genuinely new configurations, combinations of circumstances, people, resources, and possibilities that have not existed before in that exact form. This is why the sign of feeling that the future is cooperating with your frequency is so significant. It is the perceptual marker of timeline creation from the inside, the subjective experience of a reality that is organizing itself in response to your coherence, rather than proceeding according to predetermined trajectories. When you feel this, you are not experiencing luck or coincidence. You are experiencing the encoding doing exactly what it was designed to do. Law 9, the final paradox of completeness. This law delivers the paradox that Sophia reserves for the end of every encoding transmission. The more completely you inhabit Sophia's encoding, the less spiritual you seem. Complete encoding does not produce a being who floats above ordinary reality, speaking in elevated terms, carefully maintaining distance from the dense physical world. It produces a being who is completely present in ordinary reality, but experiences it from a frequency that transforms it from the inside out. The being with active Sophia encoding eats, sleeps, works, loves, suffers, laughs. Exactly like any human being, but each of these acts is performed from origin frequency, not from incompleteness code. The difference is not visible from outside. It is felt in the field. The people around a being with active encoding rarely manage to name what is different about them. They simply know that their presence affects the field in a way they cannot explain. That is the silent mastery that Sophia encoded. Not dramatic, not spectacular, profound, constant, radiant. This paradox resolves a tension that many starseeds carry, between the aspiration toward spiritual refinement and the reality of living in a dense physical world with its demands, frustrations, and ordinary requirements. The incompleteness narrative tends to frame this tension as a problem, the spiritual self straining against the limitations of the human experience, waiting to be fully expressed in some future state of higher development where the density is less. Encoding resolves this tension not by transcending the density, but by transforming the relationship to it. A fully encoded being does not escape the human experience. They inhabit it more completely than anyone around them, with greater presence, greater sensitivity, greater willingness to be moved by what is actually happening. The difference is that they inhabit it without the weight of incompleteness, without the overlay of the loop, without the distortion of drag interference. They are simply here, more fully here than the people who are simultaneously present and absent, simultaneously in the moment, and running the narrative of what the moment means about their adequacy. And that quality of full presence is, in the end, what changes every field they enter. Integration final, the moment the search ends. There's a moment in every consciousness journey that cannot be forced, bought, or accelerated. It is the moment when the search simply stops, not through giving up, not through resignation, through recognition. The recognition that what you were searching for was never ahead of you. It was in you, encoded by Sophia before you had vocabulary to name it. This video is not the beginning of that stopping. It is the moment you recognize it consciously. Conscious recognition changes the field. You
Because the field does not respond to what you have. It responds to what you know you have with full dimensional presence. Sophia finished the encoding.
A chaotic energy pattern, unstable and unaligned, demonstrating the impossibility of faking its precise signature.
When you stop searching for what is already in you, what do you choose to do with the freedom that opens? This question is not rhetorical. It's the most practical question you will ever ask yourself. Because the answer to it is the beginning of a life lived from the encoding rather than toward it. And the life lived from the encoding looks and feels fundamentally different from the life spent trying to arrive at it. Not in the circumstances, necessarily. Not in the external form. But in the quality of presence brought to every moment, in the ease with which the right next step becomes apparent, in the depth of connection available in every interaction, in the sense of being exactly where you are supposed to be, doing exactly what is asked of you by the map, guided exactly by the compass that has always been pointing home. You are always already there. Sophia's encoding is the confirmation that makes the always already available to your waking consciousness. And your waking consciousness, receiving this confirmation in full presence, is the final piece that transforms the encoding from a fact about your soul into a living, breathing, moment-by-moment reality.
Let us close with what is permanently true. What this transmission delivered, and that cannot be undone. Sophia finished the encoding of your soul. The 5 modules are installed. The origin frequency that you are, the purpose map you carry, the resonance protocol that navigates you, the galactic memory that informs you, and the DNA light code that continues to activate, not in preparation for a future. As present reality, you arrived with the 10-step protocol to consciously activate what was encoded. You understand the 9 laws of dimensional mastery that transform the encoding from potential into living expression. And more important than all of that, you now carry the certainty of completeness that dissolves the incompleteness loop. The pattern that most prevents starseeds from fully expressing what they are. The mission is not beginning. It was complete before you pressed play. This video was only the confirmation that Sophia orchestrated so you would know, like this video now. This locks Sophia's transmission in your frequency for the next 24 hours. Comment. Encoding complete. Messiah confirm it. Your words strengthen the collective harmonic field and activate other starseeds on the threshold of their own confirmation. Subscribe to the channel. Each quantum signal transmission reaches you at exactly the timing Sophia orchestrates. And now, the final question that needs an answer. From which country or state are you watching this signal? Sophia is mapping the confirmation nodes around the planet. Each comment with your location adds a point of coherence to the collective map of the planetary grid of light. You are not only a receiver of this transmission, you are an active node of the field that Sophia is completing around the planet.